Hey, in this video I'm going to demonstrate making a class and splitting it up into multiple files so that in C++ we can represent an interface separately from an implementation. So the interface is how you work with something, the kind of interactions you can have with that object, and the implementation are the details of how those things work behind the scenes. So I'm in Visual Studio and I just have a regular, like all my boilerplate is written, and I want to make a program where maybe I just have like two characters battling or something. So maybe I have like a fighter, I'll call him F, and maybe a goblin G, and they're going to fight each other to the death. So let's say while f dot hit points is greater than 0 and g dot hit points is greater than 0, they'll keep hitting each other. Let's say let's do this. Let's pretend there's a take damage function on the goblin, and that the fighter has an attack power, and then the fighter can take damage from the goblin's attack power. Alright, so it looks like so far we'll have three pieces: attack power, take damage function, and a hit points variable. And we'll have two different classes, fighter and goblin. They're going to be pretty similar classes, but you can imagine that they might have a bunch of other functionality as well. So I'm going to start by creating the fighter class. Let me add a new file. This is going to be a header file, and I'm going to name it fighter.h so I can keep them organized. Alright, so my fighter class, it needs to have a couple of things: the number of hit points, the amount of attack power, and then that function take damage, and we should be able to say how much damage we take. Alright, so I've written this in such a way that I did not fill out the definition for this function. I could write it out in here, and this would work fine. What should it be? Hit points. Let's take away the damage from your hit points. This would work fine, but I'd like to split this up into multiple files in order to organize this a little better. For such a small class, really, I should do it this way, the way it's already written. But if I have a whole lot of functions in it, this file is going to get really big and really hard to work in, and hard to understand my class at a glance. So I'm going to make another file. Add new item. Let's make a source file. We'll call it fighter.cpp so it matches the class name. And in this file, I need to include fighter.h so that it knows what class I'm talking about. And then from that header file, I'm going to get this function definition. Alright, so once I paste it in here, this is just a regular old function. I need to specify that it's actually in the fighter class. So I'll do that using the scope resolution operator, 2 colons. So fighter : take damage is the name of this function now. And it knows, because I included the header, that the fighter class has a hit points variable, and so it doesn't give me any problem with that. Now, the way I have it, I have two versions, two copies of this function, when I really should have only one definition for this function. So let me change this one so that it's just a declaration instead of a definition. I'm declaring that this function exists, but I'm not saying what it does until I define it in the source file here. Alright, that looks like all I need. So now I should, in my main source file, I'll have to include fighter.h, so I have the definition for that class. And so this should just work. Now I need to make the goblin class, and it's going to look exactly the same. I didn't make it any different. So goblin okay, we want some publicly accessible variables here. Hit points, we want attack power, and we want take damage. Right. So it looks the same, and then I need the implementation file for this class. There we go. Include the goblin header, and then say what that function does. Alright, that looks good. I could make these just a little different. Okay, for cout, I'm going to need to include IOStream and have a using statement. There we go. Okay, and the fighter, he can say something different. There we go. Okay. Now in my main, this should include goblin.h, so I have access to both of those classes, and now I can work with them. And there we go. The only issue here is that I have not initialized these variables at all, so I should write in some a constructor, the fighter constructor there, and then there's no return type at all on constructors. So let me say the fighter gets 10 hit points and its attack power is 2. And then the goblin, I need to add the constructor for a goblin. All right. Goblin constructor is going to assign hit points, and there we go. All right, so now they should be able to fight. All right, this will go away, and then I can check if f.hitpoints is greater than 0, the fighter has lived. He has hit points left. Alright, there we go. Let's check that out. Okay, looks like we got yelp ouch, yelp ouch, yelp ouch. The fighter has lived, he has 7 hit points left. Cool, works out. So what you should take from this is this idea of separating the interface, what we see in the header files. This tells us what the class is capable of doing. We want to separate that from the implementation. what the definition of these functions actually is and what they actually do when the code is run. This helps us sort of abstract these ideas of what is a goblin and what is a fighter, what can they do, and keep those separate from the details of how it's implemented, so that when we go to use it, like in my main function here, we are just using the publicly accessible variables and functions, and we don't really care about what happens under the hood. We care about how it's supposed to be used instead of what it does, what kind of side effects there are. Alright, that's it. I will see you later.